Kevin Violet. I'm an alcoholic. I'm here to carry the message tonight, and I hope I manage to do that, at least for one person in this room. My sobriety date is August 25th, 2012. I have a sponsor, and he has a sponsor, and so on down the line. I guess that everybody knows that this is a spiritual program, and I feel really good that I know that my higher power is with me tonight to help me get through this. I've done it a few times. It doesn't really make it any easier, but anyways, so I'll tell you what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. I was born in Massachusetts and to a really good family. Had good parents who are been married for 58 years and still together. I got an older brother and a younger sister, and I'm the middle guy. And if anybody ever been a middle child, they know what I went through. It wasn't always easy, but probably had some alcoholic ways before I even knew about it and got into alcoholism. But you know, being a middle child, I was never had enough of what my brother had, and never had enough of what my little sister had. And you know, my brother could get away with things that I couldn't, and my sister was given everything. You know, it was according to me, but it wasn't like that. I had really good parents, and everything was fair and equal, and it was just the way I looked at life. You know, we grew up in a big neighborhood that was full of kids, and we had kids from every walk of life, and I had a really good childhood. My parents provided everything we needed. Didn't have as much as some, and had more than others. And you know, I wasn't always grateful for the things I had, and I wanted things that other guys and girls had. But we got along, you know, and I was able to intermingle, and we had a good time, you know, playing in the streets, and we had our groups, and you know. But my MO was always that I could be the chameleon and change my colors and fit in with who I needed to fit in with that at that point, you know, in my life, even from a young age. You know, if they had what I wanted, I was going to be there and forget about the people that really were more important to me. And I just kind of carried that through growing up. But you know, I got along. I did good in school, got good grades and all that. For some reason, I don't know what it was, but I would get A's and B's, but they would say that little box there about my conduct, you know. And it's just the way I don't know, I had to horse around or do stuff, but I still managed to pull grades, and you know, that was good enough for me. And you know, my parents, you know, they just didn't like the comments, but they dealt with it in their way, and it wasn't always, you know, there was punishment. You know, my parents were somewhat strict, and you know, as I grew up, we had so many kids in the neighborhood and stuff like that that you know, we played a lot of sports. I was involved in sports growing up, and you know, I always had to be the one in charge. I wanted to be the captain of the soccer team or the football team when we were playing, you know, in the streets, and the kickball. You know, I had to be the man to choose sides and run the show, and you know, I made enemies, I made friends, and that was just childhood, you know, I thought, but that carried on through, and you know, I went through school and just regular kid, you know. There were times I felt like I didn't fit in, but it wasn't really a big issue. I got along with most everybody. You know, then I got up into high school, and you know, things start showing up. There's temptations like we all see, you know, at that age, and you know, I stayed away from it. I watched some kids get in some big trouble, and some kids go down the wrong path, and I was bound and determined not to do that. Then you know, you got older brothers and their friends, and you start seeing them do things, and you start getting, well, I started getting curious, and you know, my parents both drank. My dad, he drank, you know, enough that he wasn't an alcoholic or isn't an alcoholic, but he drank. my mother would drink at parties and whatnot, and I watched them, and they were always having fun, and I thought that would be kind of neat, you know, when I grow up, you know. They had a bar down in the basement, and that's where we watched TV, you know, so they could have their TV upstairs. And, you know, I think probably when I was like 12 or 13, I kind of tasted a few things, and it was nasty. I just, you know, I wasn't looking for any relief or didn't know the buzz or whatever, but I tried them, and, you know, it wasn't really a big deal. But then, you know, around 14, you know, friends were starting to get a hold of a bottle here and a 6-pack of beer, and I tried it, and I finally felt what everybody said they were feeling, and that comfort came over me, and the inhibitions, and just I was able to fit in better, you know, even though I thought I was all right fitting in, but it was more fun, you know, I'll admit it. I enjoyed that buzz, and from that time on, I just started seeking it, and it wasn't, looking back on it, an obsession at that point, but that was, you know, what I wanted to do every once in a while, and have more fun, you know. It was all about me, you know, having fun and doing what I wanted to do. So, you know, I picked up on it here and there, you know. High school, you start having dances, and kids are getting beer, and a few, you know, little green cigarettes and that stuff. That's part of my story. I won't deny that, but I know this is Alcoholics Anonymous. But, and I enjoyed those, and that was basically my main thing. I mean, that was through high school, I mean, honestly, every day, and still pulled straight A's. I didn't think there was anything wrong with it. But weekends were made for Michelob, I guess, and I enjoyed beer, and we found ways to get beer, and we would go to the dances, and that was the easy way to meet the girls and dance with them and all that good stuff. And it was just a way of life, you know. Played sports, played baseball, was pretty good in baseball. But me being the guy that wanted to be in charge, I was a pitcher in Little League and whatnot, and I was good at it. But when I got to high school, I wasn't as big or as fast, and I wasn't going to be starting pitcher, and that wasn't for me. My family picked up tennis. Back then it was a real big sport, and we had a tennis club built a quarter-mile right through the woods from where I lived, and we had a membership, and we all took up tennis, and I started playing tennis, and I got pretty damn good at that. And I played tennis from the time I was 15 until I was 22, and played it all through high school, won championships, but I was in charge. I was the #1 singles player. We won the state champs a couple times. We were always, you know, in contention for everything. And I had big plans for playing tennis for quite a long time. And, you know, what I was getting at is that I was in charge. It was my own destiny. I was one-on-one with this guy. I was the #1 on the team. I was the captain of the team. You know, that's where I wanted to be. I wanted to be the man, you know. But that just, you know, played out. And then I hit college. I went to college, and I got on the tennis team there. And I wasn't #1 anymore. You know, there was some guys that were seniors and that were better and bigger and all that good stuff. They'd been playing for 4 more years than I had been playing. But by the time I got to college, beer was my thing. And beer was my drink of choice. I just loved Budweiser. And I drank it whenever I could by that time. And when I went to college, the keg parties were it, you know. There was a big school, and there were keg parties from Thursday night till Monday morning. And there was a bar on campus, and that was my life, you know, chasing the girls and drinking beer and trying to make it to class on time. But, you know, I did all that, and during that time, freshman year, I was playing tennis, and my wrist started getting sore. And I couldn't play. I had to go to the doctor, and I ended up having a wrist operation, and my tennis career went out down the tubes on me. You know, I couldn't play with my right hand. I couldn't play tennis anymore. And that's when, you know, during college, well, during those operations, you know, they give me painkillers. I'm drinking beer with painkillers, and it really wasn't, you know, it's part of my story, but I never really took to them. You know, they didn't make me feel good. You know, the next morning, you know, they just did not make me feel good. It wasn't what I wanted, but I did it anyways. You know, it just, things were, you know, during the night when I was partying, it was a good deal, but the next day, and I had to take so many of them because I ended up having 3 operations, and in 3 years, and it wasn't good for me. But the beer was always there. You know, I just kept drinking beer. You know, I can remember my mom coming up to college, and it was only about an hour and a half from home, so she would come up every couple of weeks and bring me a care package from home, and with everything under the sun for food and everything, bring it into the dorms. And I can remember coming up one day, and she had all this food, and she had a tin full of chocolate chip cookies, and she said, "I didn't bring any milk because you know, I figured it might spoil on the ride or whatever." And I was like, "Ma, we don't need milk, we got beer," you know. And honestly, I think I remember her looking at me right in the face, and she said, "Kevin, you can become an alcoholic just drinking beer." And I was like, "Mom, come on, you know, I got this covered." You know, I had everything covered. I always did. You know, I had a plan. I knew what I was doing. Look where it got me. But so I did what I did in college, and you know, I had a good bunch of friends up there, and you know, during spring vacations we would go skiing, and we were up in Loon Mountain in New Hampshire, and we were all pretty tripped out about 11 o'clock in the morning, drinking beer and everything else that we were doing, you know. And I was a good skier too. You know, I skied my whole life, and we got to the top of one of these slopes, and it was spring skiing, so there was a few rocks and everything, and everybody's like, "How are we going to get down that?" And I said, "Just follow me." You know, I wanted to be the leader again. Well, I went down and made it through all the rocks, and I hit the bottom where it leveled out, and it was all slush, and my skis stopped like I hit cement, and I went into a nosedive, and I took one bounce, and I was in the trees, and I broke my hip, and I ended up spending 2 weeks in traction, and morphine, give me more morphine, give me, you know, it was like all that stuff. And it was just, at that point in my life, I did not know that God was watching out for me. I realize now, regressing, I didn't say that. I grew up in a good Catholic family. We went to church every Sunday. My mother almost was a nun. That's how devoted she was. It just didn't pan out for her. But I knew God, and I believed in God. And you know, I prayed when I was younger, but when I got to college, you know, I was looking out for me, going to have fun, gonna meet the girls, gonna, you know, I made A's in high school, I'm gonna do great. College kicked my butt, you know, because I was in the bar and in the parties all the time, and I didn't see it, you know. I could feel it, but at night I drank away my problems, and in the morning I woke right back up to them, and I didn't have an answer. I did not have an answer to what was going on. You know, I lost a few semesters. I lost a semester with that ski accident. I lost a semester with my wrist operations. So I was falling behind in that. I changed my major, and I kept drinking. You know, when I broke my hip, I finally got out of the hospital. I went back to my house with my parents, and I had to get back to school. I had a dorm sitting there that was empty, and I was paid for, and I got on my crutches and thumbed up to the highway and thumbed back to college on crutches just to get back there. That's how big the obsession was for me to drink. I knew that's where the party was, and I wasn't having no fun sitting there with my parents. And I also had a girlfriend there, so I had a lot of motives that weren't the best motives. So I did that, and I spent 4 months there till the semester ended, and I went from 100 and 70 pounds to 205 pounds eating cookies and drinking beer, you know? So, and so, you know, then, you know, I went back and started the next semester fresh, you know, gonna get this all right, and the keggers were still there, and everything was still there, and I just went with that instead of the books. And I hung in there, and I had a girlfriend that I had met freshman year, and I was there for 4 years, and I got about 2 years of education. Fought my ass off through it, cheated my way through it, whatever I had to do. But as long as I was having fun, I didn't care about anything, and I was totally a snow job to my parents. Everything's good, Dad. Everything's good. I got it. You know. I was managing to bring in C's, D's. And that wasn't cutting it. My dad, you know, I worked for my dad since I was 14. He's a general contractor, and I paid. He made me put my money away from those summers, and I paid for it. And he just said, "It's your money, man. Do what you want to do. You know, you want to be a big boy." So I did what I had to do, and I ended up staying there the last semester. I did not go to school. My finals came in Christmas time, and I was so far behind. I studied all night, and there's something in the book that says the same thing. I was prepared for everything, and by the time I was done prepared, I cracked a beer, and I was on my way. It was just, I read that in the book, and I was like, that was me that day. And I was gonna go, for some reason I thought about, I'm gonna go take that final. I studied for it all night, and I got in my car and I started driving, and I stopped at the package store, and I never really drank hard liquor, and I stopped and bought a bottle of Southern Comfort and rode around the deepest, darkest part of New Bedford, Massachusetts, which is a dive. And I don't know what it was. And I rode around there till tests were over, and I came back and went back to the parties. And I never cracked another book. And about 3 weeks later, my girlfriend told me she was pregnant. And I was like, dang. So, you know, and honestly, we were talking about getting married. She was graduating with straight A's, had a job lined up and all that. She was a smart girl, and I was using her to the max for that. You know, I was like, we'll be all right. You know, I got a job with Dad if I need it. You know, I know how to pound nails and build houses, and that's what I'm gonna do. So I had to come back home with my tail tucked between my legs and talk to my parents and say, Dad, I need a job. And being good parents and a good dad, he knew I was in trouble, and he bailed me out like he did all the time. You know, we had a good relationship, even though I put him through all that stress growing up, and my mother too. She was on board, but being a good Christian and me having a child out of wedlock, that was like the baddest thing that I could have done. And I just had another beer and didn't give a crap. You know, I was gonna do what I'm gonna do, you know. And I told myself that when I turned 18, that I'm 18, I'm a man. Go figure, you know. I'm not gonna let anybody tell me what to do anymore, you know. The rules, it's me. I'm gonna run this show. And again, look where it got me. But I started working for him, and did what I had to do. Continued to drink. You know, he knew that I drank. He would say it, but at the same point, a lot of days there was a case of beer at the end of the day. You know, we worked hard. And Dad liked to drink beer, and he was like to reward us. Really, it wasn't that he needed it or wanted it, but he was proud of us. We got the job done. He made money, and we had a good crew. And over the years, that turned into more and more beer. You know, we would come to lunchtime, and he was like, "I'm sick of bologna sandwiches. Let's go down to the pub and have a beer and a burger." And we did that, and then it would turn into a pitcher and burger, and then a couple pitchers, and next thing you know, it's 3:30, and he's like, we gotta get back to pick up, you know? And we go back and pick up, and then go back to the house and sit in the garage and drink beer. And all these times, you know, I knew I was getting away with it. My wife wasn't happy, and I just come in, plowed every night, and sit down, and I had one child, and then it turned into I had a daughter also, and I was a good dad, you know. And I went to the ball games, and I took the kids out and did things, you know, but it was like Saturdays, but it was hard for me, you know. And I, you know, then I would, at nighttime they'd go to bed, and I'd get right back into what I do. But I mean, that went on for, I was married for 13 years, and it wasn't enough for me, you know. I couldn't do what I wanted to do without hurting people, and I had to get out. And all this time, you know, I'm getting hammered by my father. You gotta slow down. You gotta slow down. You know, I went behind the seat of the truck. There's a 12-pack in there. What are you doing? You know, and you know the name's on the side of the truck. You know, and I was like, I'm all right, Dad. Don't worry. All right, yeah, I won't do it. I won't do it. I said that a million times, and I told a million people that I was sorry about everything that went on, all the wreckage that I did to them, the worries, the heartaches, the disappointments, the times I just bailed on things, my responsibilities. And, you know, I never went to jail, good thing. That doesn't mean I shouldn't have. You know, I got away with a lot of stuff. Whether or not it was luck or God on my side, I got pulled over 3 times, had the cuffs on once for DUI, and did not get a DUI, you know. It was one of those nights, I fought with my wife, we screaming at each other, and I said, forget it. And I got in the car and had a nice little sports car, and I got in that, sped away, went and got some more beer, and went up to the top of the mountain and just drank away all my problems. Everything was good. About 2 o'clock in the morning, I came down off the top of the mountain, stopped at McDonald's, took off a little fast out of the parking lot, and I got blue lighted. And I was like, oh no. And I had 2 40s in the back seat, and one between my legs, and I got the whole 9 yards from this officer, and he put the cuffs on me and put me in the back seat. And then it came to me. I'm looking at the guy in the mirror, and I was like, I know this guy. I know this guy. And I start talking to him, and he's like telling me to shut up, you know, shut up, you know. And I said, aren't you Manny? He goes, no. And I said, Franny? He's like, no. And I said, Gary. And he's like, and he turned around and he looked at me, he goes, Kevin. And I'm like, dang. And he's like, man, he said, I didn't recognize you. This was a guy that I used to go, I had a bunch of hunting buddies, we'd go up to Vermont and hunt deer. And I would only see these guys once a year, you know, for 3 weekends. And he worked in the next town over for me as a cop. And so he's like, oh man, I didn't know that was you. He says, oh, what am I gonna do? What am I gonna do? And he goes, well, it's 2 o'clock in the morning. He says, there's nobody, it was a little town. He said, there's nobody at the police station. He said, let's go. And he got me out of it. And we got to the station, and he said, your lucky day. He said, I was able to erase this whole thing. And you know, he said, you got to do one thing for me. I said, what's that? And he said, you got to blow the tube. And I was like, looked at him like, he goes, no, I just got to see. And I blew a .28. And he's like, man, I got away with it, you know? So like I said, I should have been in jail for that and a few other stops. And, you know, it was just, I'm saying to myself, I'm lucky. And now knowing what I know, it was God helping me, doing for me what I couldn't do for myself. And I went on with that. I got pulled over a couple other times. I knew a dispatcher one time when I left my father's after work. I ran from the guy. And I got pulled over right in front of the house of one of my father's supervisors. And the cop let me go. That day I'd worked for a police officer. We were doing an audition for him. and he would happen to be on dispatch, and he goes, just follow him home, get him home. You know, what's that, you know? So it's not saying I was goody two-shoes and all that. I didn't go to jail or DUIs. I did my stuff, you know. I lied, cheated, steal, did what I had to do what I had to do, you know. And it turned into that it was an obsession that I could not get away from and did not realize what it was. You know, I drank beer. I'm just drinking beer, you know. But there was always a 12-pack behind my seat, and when that ran out, I had to find a way to go to the lumberyard or do something to get some more. Managed to be safe at work, never fell off a roof, never cut my fingers off or anything, you know, and I just chalked it up to because I'm good, you know. But, so I ended up walking away from my family. I had 2 kids. They were 10 and 12 at the point. And I heard it many times in here. It was, and when I heard it, it was me. I was just like, I love you, but I gotta go. I gotta go, you know. I was running away. Marriage wasn't going good, and I did not care about anything in the world except for living the way I wanted to live, which was drinking every day, and you know, I made the money, I paid the bills, I had the house, I had the swimming pool, I had the sports car, and I just told my ex-wife, take it, I'm out of here, you know. And for the longest time I said, I didn't lose that stuff, I gave it away. Well, I lost that stuff, you know. It was my choice, and that was my life. I was making choices like that all the time. I did not care what was happening to me, I did not care what was happening to you. As long as I was able to get what I needed that day, however I got it, and then I was happy. But the marriage wasn't going good, and I had been at that time looking for a hunting camp up in Vermont, because I'm a deer hunter, I love hunting, and we had $10,000 set aside, and I was just on the verge of finding a spot to build a little camp, and that's when I decided to leave. And I was running away from my problems. I just said, I'm out of here, you know, thinking that I'll leave all this problem over here and I'll go to Vermont and do my thing, and every life will be good, you know. I had, you know, I could see my kids and all that stuff, and so I moved up to Vermont, and I found all the right people right when I got there, and the leopard did not change his spots. I just did what I did, but it was a lot easier up there in the woods and the mountains, and I made some good friends, but they were people just like me, and they did just what I did, and I had a good time. And I met my current wife up there, and we've made a life together since then. But I did not change one bit. I married her, and I was still that angry alcoholic, and didn't realize it, and it was all about me. I'm doing for you, you know, paying the bills, and, you know, putting the food on the table, and everything that goes with it. I'm going to do what I'm going to do. And we had hard times here and there, and, you know, it was a struggle to work up there. You know, I went from a good paying job working for my dad, which I was probably a little overpaid, and had insurance and a nice pickup, 4-wheel drive pickup truck with the plow, snow plow on it, and all that good stuff. And he actually let me take that truck when I moved up to Vermont. He's like, take the truck, just go. He was not happy, you know. And I made that life up in Vermont with my new wife, and we had a good time, you know, no doubt. We had hard times, but I was doing what I wanted to do. Actually, my son came up and was having trouble when he was 14, 15 years old, and he lived with me for 3 or 4 months, and he watched me do what I was going to do, and came the day I found him with those little green cigarettes, and I was the law all of a sudden, you know, and he didn't like it, and he's like, you do it, and this and that, and you're drinking, and he was out of there. And to this day, I don't have a relationship with my son or my daughter. It's one biggest amends that I have yet to make. It's a tough thing for me. They don't want to answer the phone. They don't want talk to me even through my sister who sees them all the time, nothing. But I trust the program, and if that's the way it is, I have to accept it and just continue to try, make the effort to make those amends, and eventually I believe that it will happen. It's been 4 years. They know that I'm sober. They know that I'm all right. They know that I'm doing better, but you know, I caused a lot of pain and scars to everyone I came in contact with. And the end of the Vermont thing was, I worked for a gentleman, he was a general contractor, and it was just him and I. He was 65 years old, I was 45 years old. And every day he would show up with a truckload of material, and drive me to a job and say, here you go. Some days I'd be there for a week, some days I'd be there for 2 weeks, I mean some jobs, and I'd be alone. And so it was a piece of cake, you know. Crack a beer whenever I want to, get the job done, don't let the homeowners see me, don't smell like beer, you know, do all the cover-ups that we all do, or I did. And as long as I got away with it, I was good. I made good money. The day he hired me, he said, there's one thing, there's no drinking on the job. Well, I had met him at 10 o'clock in the morning. I already had probably 4 beers in me and went, right, okay. Turned around, went out, cracked a beer, went home, I did my thing, and came to work the next day. And I worked for him for 7 years and did that every day for 7 years. And along that time, did not see what was happening, but I had a few people 12-step me, and I didn't see the light at all. I didn't know, you know, you drink every day, you drink a lot, you know. I said, yeah, well, I drink beer, you know, I just drink beer. And, you know, apparently, after 7 years, my boss got wind of it. I don't know how long he knew it, but we were on a job, and he just said, tomorrow's your last day. And I was like, what? He said, you've been drinking on the job. And at that point, I had a good idea I was alcoholic. You know, I would had some shakes in the mornings, and I knew I had to have it, and if I didn't have it, I would panic, and if I didn't have the money for it, I would panic, or I'd find it however I could find it. And I just looked at him. I remember looking at him just square in the eye and said, I think I need help. And left it at that. And he let me finish the day, he paid me. I called him, tried to plead my case, and he had nothing to do with it. So I was like, well, I'm a good carpenter, I'll get work. And it was middle winter, and there was no work to be found up in the mountains. And I had a house that was 7 years old that I built. I had a big mortgage on it. Yeah, it was a regular mortgage, but without a paycheck, it's a big mortgage. You know, and I just happened to call down. My dad had moved down here to retire, and he moved down here to play golf. He didn't retire. He's a general contractor, like I said. And I had called him and just to shoot the crap with him. And he says, how you doing? What's up? And I go, oh, Dad, haven't worked in a month. We got no work. You know, start telling stories. We got no work. Didn't tell him I got fired for drinking. He's like, oh, well, why don't you get in a truck, come down here, we'll play some golf. He says, I got a audition that I'm doing. He says, you can frame it up for me. Make some money, we'll play some golf, see your mother. I was like, great, I'm there. Got in my truck, I was down here, it took whatever it took me to drive, 18 hours to get here. And did that audition, did the next one. I was here for a month. He said, why don't you get Karen down here? She's been at home for a month. And so when she got here, he put the screws to her. You guys got to move here. You got to move here. You got to move here. And I'm going, no, Dad, no. I'm from New England. I'm staying up in the hills, right where I thought I was going to live in Vermont for the rest of my life. I loved it. So he finally convinced me when she went home. Plenty of work, all that stuff. And me being in the situation, I said, I got to do this. You know, the work's here, the weather, Karen's going to like it. And I called her and said, sell the house. And she sold the house in a week. We got every nickel we wanted for it. And we moved down here. And that was about 2 months later, the economy hit the bottom, you know, the housing market. And so God had done for me again, you know, giving me the job, giving me everything I needed for my home, Did not realize it. It took me 4 years after that. Continuing drinking, doing what I do, beating everybody up. And then finally came to one night after a long, hard day of trimming trees on a 24-foot ladder with a power pole saw, drinking beer all day, 90 degrees. I came home blotto. And by 8 o'clock, and I continued drinking. By 8 o'clock, I was ready for bed. I was going to fall over. I was tired. I was drunk. And I went in the bedroom, and my wife wanted to come in the bedroom, and she turned the TV on, and I went ballistic. That's what I do. That's what I did. I'm an angry drunk. And I went into the last major tirade that I had, one of 1,000 that I had on her. Never physically touched her, but I think I hurt her worse by all my words and all the damage that I did to her. Just constantly ranting and raving and screaming and yelling and throwing things, and just what I did. But in that time, I can remember her getting back against the wall. We were nose to nose. She was crying, and I'm screaming bloody murder at her. I felt myself about 6 feet behind me, watching myself do this. I had an out-of-body experience, as far as I can tell. You know, I just was like, what am I doing? I'm saying this, what am I doing? What am I doing? And I stopped. I just stopped in my tracks. And I just walked away in the middle of it. You know, I wasn't done. I wasn't even close to being done. And I just stopped. And I walked out in the garage, and I stood there, and I can remember just saying to myself, that had to be God. That had to be God. I believe in God. And I just felt like that was God just pulling the reins on me, saying, enough, enough. And I left the house, and I wasn't coming back that night. I was done with it, but I actually grabbed a 12-pack of beer, and I found myself on Route 1 in the Motel 6. That was, you know, it was like, what is that? And I sat there, and I never opened that 12-pack of beer. And I sat there and thought, and all I could think about, that was God. That was God. I showed up the next morning. Obviously, she was distraught. Didn't want anything to do with me. And I walked in the room, and I just looked at her. And the first thing, I never thought of it. It never came to my head. But the first words that came out of my mouth was, I guess I got to go to AA. And she just looked at me and said, you think? And to this day, to this day, I have no idea what that was not conceived in my brain to say. It just came out of me. So I think, you know, I'm positive there was some divine intervention there. And so she said, well, I'll look it up in the phone book. And she looked it up in the phone book, gave me the phone number, and I can remember her in the other room going, you calling him? You calling him? And I called, and it was a Sunday. And I said to Karen, I said, it's Sunday. Nobody's going to answer the phone. You know, I was like, they're not open. She's like, you call them. So I called, and I got somebody nice on the phone, and they told me where the meetings were, and being petrified, I got in my truck and I went around Moore County and checked out all the buildings. And I can remember coming to this building, and there was actually a meeting going on. It was probably a noon meeting. I don't know what. It was a Sunday, so it was probably an 11 o'clock meeting. And I looked in the window, and I was scared to death. This building just scared me, you know? And I was like, I'm not going there. I'm not going there. You know, this old building, and it was full like this, and I was like, I'm not going there. So I ended up finding a meeting, and the first meeting I went to was at over near the hospital. It wasn't in the hospital. They had a small room for beginners, and it was a Sunday afternoon meeting, and I went in there, and I instantly felt that I was in the right place. There were some nice people there, older people, younger people, and everybody said hello to me and introduced themselves to me. And unbeknownst to me, we introduced ourselves, and I basically told them this story, and they let me. You know, I didn't know what I was supposed to do, and they just let me say what I had to say, and I basically told them where I was and what I did and why I'm here. And after the meeting, I got some phone numbers, and everybody wanted to talk to me and told me about more meetings, and I felt like something was right. I just, God had planted me where I needed to be. So I ended up continuing on the meetings, and I got the courage to come here because it was the next meeting, and I found my home. You know, this is where I've been coming ever since. This is my home group. I'm not proud to say that I don't participate in the home group as much as I can, but I mean, as much as I should, but I do as much as I can for this place and people around here. But I got a sponsor. I did get my first sponsor for probably a week, and he wasn't ready to be a sponsor. He was only probably 6 months sober or something, and I didn't know that. And I ended up meeting another gentleman, and he basically asked me if I needed a sponsor, and I said yes. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me. He took me through the steps. He taught me, showed me how to get a relationship with my higher power, whom I call God, whom I believed in my whole life. And that was a somewhat easy thing, but I just had to be shown how to develop that relationship. And he took me through the steps, and it was a really good thing. He taught me a lot of new words that I knew the meanings of, but I did not know how to use them, such as willingness and gratitude and courage, and there's so many of them, we all know them, but he just explained the process, the steps to me, and took me through the steps. And I was eating it up like popcorn, you know, I just needed it. And, you know, I can remember him telling me I needed to try to do 90 and 90, and I was like, whoa, you know, come on, that's a big, you know, I work, you know, I got a life. And he kind of stressed that it would be a good thing. And once I started coming, you know, I did it immediately, but I just started coming, and it was like I started looking forward to it. But by the end of that day, I was looking for relief because, you know, I didn't go through the colony. I spent that first week or more detoxing myself and working and not knowing what my name was or what was what. You know, I had the shakes and the sweats and everything that alcoholics go through on my own, and I was still trying to do it on my own. But when I got that sponsor, I realized that I need help. You know, I accepted the help, and I accepted I was alcoholic, and it was something I looked forward to and still do to this day, to come into this room. He was understanding yet firm, told me what I had to do, suggested what I had to do, and I did it, and I still do it to the best of my ability today. I try to work with other guys. I've sponsored a few people. Don't currently have anybody that I'm reading with. I've had some guys that weren't quite ready yet and went back out to put some more chapters on their story. I felt bad, but it's just the way it is. I can't take it personally. I just can pray for them. I do all the things that he's asked me to do on a daily basis. You know, I get on my knees and pray to my higher power, and gratitude list. That was one of the words that I said that he taught me, was gratitude. I mean, without that, I can still, if I don't have gratitude for whatever reason, at whatever moment, my day is shot. You know, if I don't talk to my higher power every day, my day is shot. It's just like I was drinking again. I can feel that, and I have to continue this for the rest of my life. And it's just one thing that I found is that I'm an alcoholic, and I'm always going to be an alcoholic, and that I need you people. I finally found out that I cannot do this alone, and I really love you all for that, and I'm grateful for you letting me speak tonight, and thank you.